You and your friends are coming to the latest information, the most notable current events on the YouTube channel of Nghe An Newspaper, the digital infrastructure of Nghe An Newspaper and radio and television. To know what the program is about today, please follow along below.
You can replace this text with any text you wish. You can either write in this text box or paste your own text here. Try different languages and voices. Change the speed and the pitch of the voice. You can even tweak the SSML, speech synthesis markup language, to control how the different sections of the text sound. Click on SSML above to give it a try. Enjoy using text-to-speech. Despite diplomatic efforts to end the conflict, the Russia-Ukraine battlefield is still witnessing extremely intense fighting. The Military Summary Channel reported on September 9 that Ukrainian forces launched a large-scale air attack on Donetsk, including the use of Western-made cruise missiles. The target was the command post of Russian military units that had been transferred to Donetsk to intensify attacks in the direction of Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka. Meanwhile, Moscow's forces are actively advancing into Kupiansk. According to pro-Russian sources, as of the morning of September 9, they had controlled 50% of the city. Further reports are emerging regarding the extended range of Russian FPV UAVs, which are seriously hindering the logistics operations of Ukrainian forces at a distance of 40 to 50 kilometers behind the front line. Attacking warehouses around Kramatorsk. Fighting can also be observed along almost the entire front line. Russian military experts report significant advances by the Russian army in Kupiansk as well as in Pokrovsk. According to the Rybar channel, Moscow's forces are strongly controlling the entire northern Kupiansk region. The Ukrainian army was forced to retreat to the reserve defense line. Specifically, AFU units began to abandon their positions in the industrial zone in northeastern Kupiansk. Due to being on the other side of the Oskil River, the Russian army has deeply penetrated the enemy's defense line. This shows that Ukrainian forces are unable to form a continuous defense line, and these gaps in the defense line are an invitation for the Russian army to begin dissecting the enemy's combat formations. Such a situation, according to military logic, forces the AFU command to reduce the length of the front line so that defensive formations become denser and fill the gaps. Basically, Ukrainian forces are organizing their defense along a new line, accepting the abandonment of old lines because if they only delay, the consequences could be much more serious for them. Ukrainian forces recognized this sign thanks to the appearance of pioneering Russian military units at the administrative headquarters in the central region. The new defense line established by Ukrainian forces seems to run along the axis of Blagovatka, Yubilini microdistrict, Rostov Forest area, Podily village. The main goal that the AFU command may be pursuing is to gain time to withdraw all forces from the rural areas east of Oskil. In addition to ensuring the temporary stability of the resistance forces, the potential defense line of Ukrainian forces presented above will include the important embankment road near the railway bridge over the Oskil River, near Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. It is there that AFU forces will retreat to the west bank with all their equipment. It is important to note that although this route is key, it is not the only lifeline. Overall, Ukrainian forces have begun a large-scale operation to evacuate the entire Kupiansk bridgehead, and defending the east bank of the Oskil with the appearance of the Russian army west of the city has become meaningless and dangerous. It is necessary to discuss separately the number and composition of forces that the AFU command intends to save by evacuation, and for that purpose, they are building a new defense line, the east bank of the Oskil River. There are about 3,000 to 4,000 Ukrainian servicemen from various units and military detachments, including mercenary formations. The AFU needs to save this mess so that it can then cover the Izium and Belgorod directions. In developments closely related to Kupiansk, the opinion channel commented that at the Dvyreknia bridgehead in the Kharkiv region, the Russian army took advantage of the opportunity to turn a local victory into strategic momentum. Pro-AFU sources are increasingly admitting that the Dvyreknia bridgehead has become a turning point for the Russian offensive on Kupiansk. What began as a local attack has now developed into a springboard for broader operations throughout the Kharkiv region. Moscow's forces have transformed tactical victories into a broader pressure mechanism along the entire front line. The lessons learned from this campaign are very clear. the Russian military has optimized logistics in areas with dense Ukrainian UAV activity, enhanced artillery coordination, and rationally deployed reserve forces. These adjustments by the Russian military not only demonstrate tactical improvements but also show the ability to integrate new methods into the broader campaign. Analysts supporting the KF now speculate that the Russian military may continue to use this approach near Prikholan and Veliki Bulak, areas currently under heavy Russian attack. If KF forces lose their salient positions and positions along the Kharkov front, the consequences will be very serious. Flattening the front line will reduce maneuverability, thereby diminishing the Ukrainian forces' ability to launch surprise attacks. The Kupiansk defense group would then face isolation and ultimately a retreat, which in fact they have already begun. With the Russian military reportedly controlling 50% of the city's area, such a change would accelerate the fall and force the KF command to withdraw troops from Vovchansk to stabilize collapsing front lines. The approach of the Moscow command is very systematic, applying pressure from bridgeheads, destroying the enemy's chain of strongholds with UAVs and artillery, followed by a steady advance of infantry. Unlike symbolic missile strikes, these operations reshape the battlefield by creating long-term conditions favorable to Russia. The Vovchansk bridgehead is not just a battlefield success but also a typical model. Russia is showing that local breakthroughs, when methodically exploited, lead to positive strategic results. The increasingly limited options in Kharkov demonstrate the fragility of the Ukrainian forces' defenses. Kupiansk is an immediate victory, but Russia's true victory is forcing the enemy to retreat on multiple fronts under unbearable pressure. The AMK mapping channel reported that on the Konstantinovka axis, both KF and Moscow forces have made advances, with the Russian military achieving significant results towards Nalipka. After consolidating in Terikon, the Russian military began attacking north towards Nalipka, where they have approached the village, controlling positions along the highway and in adjacent forest plantations. Meanwhile, after nearly 2 weeks of fighting, Ukrainian forces achieved success in central Kleban Byk and pushed the enemy back to the southern part of the village, where they recaptured the local school and hospital. Thus, Russia controls an additional 2.85 square kilometers, while Ukraine has regained approximately 0.2 square kilometers. On the Lyman axis, the Russian military continues to attack and has made new advances in 3 areas that to the south. After controlling most of the Serebryansky forest, the Russian military crossed the Zarabets River at a new point and entered the forest south of Zareknoy. They have advanced about 2.3 kilometers west, controlling many new positions and operating in the Zareknoy-Yampol area, but no consolidation has occurred there yet. To the north, Moscow forces continue to advance in Zareknoy and have broken through to the western outskirts. They advanced west along the Tanchana road and controlled positions on the western edge. At the same time, a series of positions on streets to the north and south, as well as at the local school and church in the village center, have been controlled by the Russian military. To the north, the Russian military continues to expand the bridgehead north of Zareknoy and is advancing towards the Statki-Zareknoy road. Here, they have consolidated control along Postovaya and Chapayiva streets, putting the remaining Ukrainian positions north of the village in a difficult situation. In total, Moscow forces have controlled an additional approximately 5.71 square kilometers. On the Novopavlovka axis, the Russian military continues offensive operations and has regained previously lost positions in 2 areas to the north. About 5 days ago, the Russian army advanced from the Novo-Mykola area across the bridge over the Solona River branch and entered the houses east of Muratka. They have taken control of at least 10 houses there. Meanwhile, other forces attacked Muratka and infiltrated the southern neighborhood, linking up with formations in the houses east of the village. As a result, about 40% of the settlement is under the control of the Russian army. Ukrainian forces are only present in the northwest. In the south, the Russian army began to advance towards the border of the Donetsk-Dnipropetrovsk region. They recaptured trenches near the reservoir southwest of Klyaripka and advanced along the adjacent tree line to the north by about 3.09 square kilometers, leaning towards Russia. In the direction of Pruzana, The Russian army continued its attacks and consolidated its position on the Andrivka-Kapstop axis with a total area of 9.75 square kilometers.
On September 9, Anthony Ziem, avoiding the office of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, accused Russia of launching a missile attack targeting the Ukrainian government building, also known as the Cabinet of Ministers building, on the night of September 7th. This is the administrative center and main workplace of the country's highest executive body. The attack marked the first time Moscow directly targeted Ukraine's central government body throughout the past 3.5 years of war. In a post on social media platform X, Mr. Ziem wrote that Russia attacked the Ukrainian government building for the first time with an Iskander missile strike. He also stated that he had discussed this matter and the strengthening of sanctions against Russia with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Both also discussed how to ensure security and enforce demands in the event of a ceasefire. The office of the President of Ukraine stated, "I informed him about Russia's continuous attacks on our cities and our residential buildings with drones, UAVs, and missiles. When visiting this building, the European Union (EU) ambassador to Ukraine, Ms. Katerina Minova, noted significant damage and many missile fragments embedded everywhere." Ms. Minova commented that the only reason this building was not reduced to rubble was that the missile failed to fully detonate. Mr. Danik, head of the Ukrainian State Emergency Service, reported that the damaged area covered 800 to 900 square meters. Mr. Danik confirmed to the press that the attack caused a rapidly spreading fire. The missile strike on the Ukrainian government building was part of the largest air raid recorded since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. The Kyiv independent newspaper affirmed that Moscow launched up to 810 Shahid UAVs and 13 cruise and ballistic missiles in just one night, targeting many objectives across Ukraine. Following this record attack, Kyiv called on Western allies to impose new economic sanctions on Moscow. Russia has not yet responded to Mr. Z's new statements. Recently, according to PR consultant to the Ukrainian president on sanctions policy, Vladislav Vlu, the Russian missile attack on September 7th targeting the Cabinet of Ministers building in Kyiv used the Iskander 9M 727 cruise missile. Notably, this missile contained over 30 foreign-made components, including parts from the US, UK, Japan, and Switzerland. Despite sanctions targeting Moscow, as the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, Moscow still conducts daily drone and missile strikes. Analysis of debris and unexploded ordnance shows that Russia remains heavily dependent on foreign-made components in the manufacturing of missiles and UAVs. Mr. Vlu confirmed that the Ukrainian cabinet building was hit by an Iskander 9M 727 missile, but the warhead did not detonate, likely due to damage. However, burning fuel caused a fire on the building's roof. In a missile of the same type previously inspected, Ukrainian officials also found 35 components manufactured in the US, 5 components from Belarus, and 57 Russian components, along with some parts from the UK, Japan, and Switzerland. The manufacturers of these components were identified as Texas Instruments, Analog Devices, Antera, US, Caltronic Limited, UK, Fujitsu, Japan, Chaco Power, Switzerland. Additionally, there were Integran, Veris, and many Russian companies such as Micron, Stella, Zyton, Ikton. According to him, compared to previously analyzed missile types, the number of components of US and European origin inside Russian Iskander missiles has decreased. Meanwhile, the proportion of components manufactured by Russia and Veris has increased. The full investigation results have been handed over to international partners to push for further sanctions. However, former presidential office advisor Alexei Arestovich expressed doubt about the version stating that an Iskander missile hit the Ukrainian Cabinet of Ministers headquarters, in
Alexander Aronit, an officer of the 12th Azov Special Forces Regiment of the Ukrainian Army, recently said that Russia is deploying UAV FPV models with a range of up to 50 kilometers, specializing in attacking targets at the front line. The AONT officer said that Russia is using UAV-PV to attack vehicles on the Varenkovo-Slavian route, about 40 to 50 kilometers from the front line. It seems that they are deployed from the mother UAV to penetrate deep into the rear. The AONT officer added that Ukrainian vehicles have been attacked by Russian FPV UAVs on the route from Izium to Slavian for many consecutive days, although this route was once considered a safe zone beyond the reach of Russian UAVs. Slavian has an area of about 59 square kilometers. The population before the war was more than 105,000 people. The city is located on the road leading from K province to Don province, the urban line considered the backbone of the Ukrainian defense line, including Slavian Gramatok, Deriskopka, and Konstantinople. Aronet said that we should have set up UAV barriers on these routes earlier and implemented the measures proposed by Ukrainian soldiers. The Ukrainian army needs to act immediately, otherwise Russia will sooner or later control all of Gramkovian. Ruska and Konstantinopka. Some Ukrainian military experts admit that this is the worst news in recent times because the road through Izium is Ukraine's vital logistics route in the region. In addition to using mother and son UAVs, Russia may have used FPV UAVs with larger batteries that allow for extended flight range. The Kharkiv Province's Infrastructure Rehabilitation and Development Agency said that the escalation of fighting and the enemy's massive deployment of FPV UAVs have made the M03 highway from Izium to Slavian extremely dangerous. We recommend that drivers consider the situation when planning their trips and avoid the above route if possible. To counter Russian UAVs, Ukrainian soldiers have recently installed fishing nets along several routes to the front line in the Don's region. A similar approach has been used by Russian forces since 2023. According to Western experts, the Russian military's lead in UAV development has forced Ukraine to adopt measures that were previously considered ineffective. According to the TASS news agency, the Russian Pacific Fleet recently announced that one of Russia's long-range nuclear missile submarines has just ended a 3-month deployment in the Pacific region. Specifically, the Project 955, a ballistic missile submarine Emperor Alexander III, has completed its tasks in the fleet's area of responsibility and returned to its main base on the Kamchatka Peninsula in the Far East. Rear Admiral Valery Volomev, commander of the Russian Pacific Submarine Force, praised the crew for successfully completing the mission, emphasizing the importance of ensuring national security. After a standard rest and resupply, the crew will resume combat training as planned, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies (CSIS). The Emperor Alexander III submarine can carry up to 16 Bulava ballistic missiles with an estimated range of about 8,300 kilometers. According to the Federation of American Scientists (FAS) report on Russian nuclear weapons, each Bulava missile can carry up to 6 warheads, but this number may have been reduced to 4. In order to comply with the New START treaty limit on the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads, the United States and Russia signed the New START treaty, which is set to expire in May 2026. To reduce and limit the deployment of strategic nuclear weapons, during the ship's commissioning ceremony in 2023, Russian President Vladimir Putin called the submarine a missile carrier without equal in its class, affirming that it would firmly ensure national security through strategic launching missions. After sea trials and a ballistic missile test, Emperor Alexander III made a journey across the Arctic Ocean to transfer the fleet from the Northern Fleet in the Barents Sea to the Pacific Fleet. The ship arrived at its current home base in September 2024. Possessing the world's largest nuclear arsenal by warheads, Russia operates 12 nuclear ballistic missile submarines, tasked with conducting threat patrols and launching nuclear missiles when ordered. The Zapotodonska plant, a machine-building plant of Russian Nuclear Energy Corporation Rosatom, has just completed the test assembly of the second RITM-400 reactor unit for the world's most powerful nuclear icebreaker, the Russia. With this capability, the nuclear icebreaker Rosia can sail year-round in the eastern part of the Northern Sea route and will boost the development of Russia's Arctic region. According to Podonska director Igor Kutop, the plant supplies reactor equipment for Russia's entire fleet of newest nuclear icebreakers. RITM-200 reactors ensure the operation of nuclear icebreakers of Project 222 on the Northern Sea route. Currently, Podonska has completed the construction of the RITM-400 reactor for the nuclear icebreaker Rosia, and the ship will become the most powerful ship in the world. According to Mr. Kutop, if counting the two giant RITM-400 reactors, J. Podonska has built a total of 12 RITM reactor vessels. Another 14 reactors are being built for the nuclear icebreaker fleet and small-scale nuclear energy projects of Russia. RITM-400 is the heart of the Russian nuclear icebreaker. According to Mr. Anton Lebed, director of the Podonska plant, this is an improved version of RITM-200 with steam generators placed inside the hull, allowing to significantly reduce the size and weight of the equipment. Mr. Lebed made it clear that in the shipbuilding industry, these are the two most important parameters, and no country has been able to do it
As the
except
European
Russia.
Union seeks to tighten its economic blockade around Moscow, the EU could impose sanctions on China for continuing to buy oil and gas from Russia. However, according to the Financial Times, the move could only happen if Washington supports and coordinates its actions. Financial Times sources said initial discussions on the possibility of imposing sanctions were launched in Brooklyn on May 7th. These measures, if implemented, would target Chinese companies or organizations that have energy trade relations with Russia. However, an EU official admitted that the talks were still at an early stage, while stressing that Brooke needed full consensus from the US side before making a final decision. In search of unity, an EU delegation traveled to Washington on May 8th. In parallel, U.S. Energy Secretary Chris White is expected to visit Brooklyn this weekend to continue discussions on policy coordination. The active exchanges between the two sides show that both Europe and the U.S. want to send a strong signal to China in the context of the Ukraine conflict, which has dragged on for 4 years. After the war in Ukraine broke out in May 2022, China quickly rose to become Russia's largest customer for oil and gas, replacing many Western partners who withdrew due to the sanctions package. Beijing has always asserted that its imports of Russian oil and gas are in line with economic development needs and are not related to politics. However, Western countries are increasingly concerned that the flow of money from energy trade is helping Moscow maintain financial resources to serve the war. Earlier this year, the EU imposed sanctions on a number of Chinese companies for supporting Russia's defense industry. At that time, Beijing reacted strongly, criticizing the EU for applying double standards and asserting that China strictly manages dual-use goods. Beijing has also repeatedly stressed that it does not supply lethal weapons to any party involved in the Ukraine conflict. Beijing has also maintained that it will ensure energy security by all means to protect its national interests. Chinese officials have warned that there are no winners in a trade war and expressed concern that sanctions could disrupt global supply chains. In contrast, Moscow has sought to capitalize on Asian economies. During a 4-day visit to China last week, Russian President Vladimir Putin criticized the West for its unacceptable tone in negotiations with economic powerhouses. The case of Carlos Brown Jr., 34, accused of murdering Ukrainian citizen Irina Zarushka on a Charlotte, North Carolina, subway train on May 22nd, has become a political flashpoint in the United States. On May 9th, U.S. Attorney General Pony announced that the Department of Justice would prosecute the killer of the Ukrainian refugee girl at the federal level and said that it would ask the court to impose the maximum sentence. She said, "I have instructed the attorneys of the agency to prosecute at the federal level against Carlos Brown Jr., who has a long history of violent crimes. We will seek the maximum sentence for this intolerable act of violence. The perpetrator will never see the light of day as a free man." Ms. Bonney said that the passing of Zarushka, a young woman who was living the American dream, was a direct result of policies that are soft on crime and favor criminals over innocent people in some cities. The U.S. Department of Justice said Brown was charged with federal manslaughter on public transportation, which carries a maximum penalty of life in prison or the death penalty. North Carolina prosecutors also charged Proud with first-degree murder. Criminal cases in the U.S. are usually handled by local prosecutors based on state and local criminal laws, while federal prosecutions only apply to violations of federal law. Surveillance video that went viral on social media on March 22nd shows Brown watching the victim get on the train and sit in the row in front of him. He took a weapon from his pocket and killed the victim. All of this happened within minutes, even though the two had no interaction. Attorney Tuong, who represented Brown in a previous case, revealed that he had a long history of mental health issues. The shocking case has sparked political debate about crime and public safety policies. President Trump has accused Democratic-led cities, including Charlotte, of being too soft on street crime. In a social media post on Cho on May 8th, he criticized the Democratic Party for having Zarushka's blood on its hands. White House spokeswoman Carol Leavitt noted that Brown had a long criminal record, including an armed robbery that landed him in prison for 5 years. Leavitt said the monster should have been locked up and Irina would still be alive. But Democratic politicians, left-wing judges, and incompetent prosecutors chose to burnish their image over protecting the community.
On September 9th, Nepal's army chief, General Azak Raikan, called on protesters in the country to seek a peaceful solution through dialogue. The statement was made as the Nepalese army began to be deployed to maintain order throughout the country. In his speech, General Raikan began by expressing deep sorrow for the damage to public property during nationwide protests and extended condolences to the families of those who died. He wished those injured a speedy recovery. Calming the current unrest, protecting national heritage, public and private property, ordinary citizens, and diplomatic missions to bring a sense of security to the people and protect their maximum interests is a common task to lead the country out of this difficult situation through peaceful means. The Nepalese army chief requested the protest group to cancel their protest plans and called for negotiations. At the end of his speech, General Raikan called on all citizens to uphold patriotism, social harmony, and unity to move forward together. Just minutes after the Chief of Staff's statement, the Nepalese army announced that they would deploy troops along with other security agencies if looting, arson, and vandalism continued. A statement issued by the Public Relations Directorate of the Nepalese Army stated that some groups are exploiting the crisis to cause serious damage to civilians and public property by engaging in looting and arson. The agency called on the public to exercise restraint and assist in preventing further destruction. The warning came after state agencies, including the government's Singha Durbar office complex, the Supreme Court headquarters, and the Nepalese Parliament building in the capital Kathmandu, were set on fire on September 9. Attacks on political leaders, police, and public infrastructure have plunged the Himalayan nation into an emergency state of chaos. Protesters have demanded an end to corruption within the government apparatus and unfair, institutionalized discriminatory policies in governance. The Nepalese army warned that security would be tightened if acts of looting and arson accompanying the protests continued to recur. They want the government to be more accountable and transparent in its decision-making processes. Protesters also demanded the lifting of the ban on social media platforms, an action they consider an attempt to suppress freedom of expression. Recently, the Nepo babies trend on social media in Nepal has exposed the lavish lifestyles of politicians' children, highlighting the stark income and economic disparities between them and ordinary citizens. This movement targets the children of officials, who are sent abroad for study by their parents and frequently flaunt designer goods and lavish lifestyles online, in contrast to the difficult situation of young people struggling to find jobs in the country. A Nepalese person expressed on Reddit, "Those rich kids know exactly where their parents' money comes from the people's taxes. While we struggle to live, those kids enjoy privileges no one else has, even showing off on social media." This has fueled public outrage over corruption, nepotism, and economic inequality. This is the root cause that has ignited the anger of the Nepalese people over the past 2 days. Meanwhile, in his first message since neighboring Nepal began to fall into violent protests on September 8, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi called on protesters in Nepal to remain calm and support restraint amid the current chaos. In a post on social media platform X on the evening of September 9, the Indian Prime Minister called the violent situation in Nepal heartbreaking. Modi also stated that the stability, peace, and prosperity of this neighboring Himalayan nation are extremely important for India. In this message, the Indian leader expressed deep sorrow over the escalating violence in Nepal, which killed 19 people and forced Prime Minister Kap Samaili to resign. On May 9, immediately after completing his inspection tour of the flood-affected areas in the 2 northern states of Pap and Kema Prades, Mr. Mi immediately chaired a meeting of the Cabinet's Security Committee to discuss developments in neighboring Nepal. Nepal, a nation of 30 million people in the Himalayas, transitioned from a monarchy to a republic in 2008 after a prolonged civil war. But since then, the country's politics have been constantly volatile, with more than 10 governments formed, making the economy bleak. Nepal relies heavily on tourism, a sector boosted by social media campaigns. Therefore, the government's ban on social media is considered to be a heavy blow to the people's important source of income. The poverty and high unemployment rate in the country have prompted many young Nepalis to enlist in the Russian army to fight in Ukraine. The Nepali Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2023 requested Russia to stop recruiting their citizens and repatriate soldiers killed in Ukraine. When participating in a protest mentioning Nepalis killed in Ukraine, a young man expressed that while officials' children return with bags, ordinary citizens' children return in coffins. On May 9, local sources in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo reported that militants linked to the Islamic State, IS, carried out 2 attacks the night before in North Kivu province, killing nearly 80 people, according to local officials. The IS-linked militant group, the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, carried out an attack in the town of Toyo in North Kivu province, killing at least 60 people. Meanwhile, an NGO leader reported a second ADF attack in the Beni area, also in North Kivu province, killing at least 18 people. The militant group has carried out a series of deadly attacks this year. In late July, it attacked a Catholic church, killing more than 40 people and kidnapping more than 10 others. In another attack in August, the group killed 52 people, carried out kidnappings, looting, burning houses and destroying other property. The Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is home to more than 100 rebel groups, and is also the scene of a larger conflict between the Democratic Republic of Congo Army and the M23 rebel group.